I know y'all getting tired of me doing Facebook Live. Can't help it though. There's been a lot going on. I don't have much of a voice this evening, but we're going to do our Wednesday night teaching. You might be catching us on Thursday. You might be catching it on Friday. You might never catch it. I don't know. But we're going to do what we can do tonight. All the live feeds that you've been seeing is because there's a move of God happening in Logan County. And I want you to be able to see some of it if you can't get out to be a part of it. Sorry. This is a sovereign move of God. There's a fire. Can be set on fire. Just get right into the flames. I'm begging you. This is something that there's been a remnant holding out for a long time. I don't think it's just a flash in the pan either. But the thing of it is we're going to step in and see where the wind blows and what happens. So I urge you, as these services take place, to pop in Friday night. No, tomorrow's Thursday night. Tomorrow's Thursday. We've been doing this for like 2 weeks now, and I'm befuddled. My brain's befuddled. I don't know. Sometimes I don't even know where I am. And that's also the work that God's doing too. Anyway, tomorrow night, it's at New Day. Seth Kernute will be preaching. He preached tonight. Don't miss it. Really, don't miss it. And you know, these services do last a while. It's nobody rushes what God's doing. Nobody's in a hurry to get through anything. It's not one of those things where you come in and sing your 3 songs and the preacher preaches and you go home. It's a little more than that. So come expecting to see a move of God. And if you can't stay for the entire thing, you don't have to. Tonight I didn't get to walk in there until 8:30. It's okay. So do what you can do, but I urge you to be a part. Okay, I have been asked to give a teaching on the adulterous woman. And I do love her story. Love, love, love it. Yes, Barb, we're all seeking God's face. Not his hands, but his face. Now, there's one thought that I want to plant in your mind before I go into this. Are you ready? Insatiable human lust, whatever the object of desire, will lead to a life of bondage. High destiny. Shall I say that again? Insatiable human lust, whatever the object of desire, will lead to a life of bondage. Think about that. Are there things that you're lusting for? I'm sorry, throat's raw. Bear with me. So, in the story of the adulterous woman, it kind of is in 2 parts. The woman is brought before Jesus. We're going to see in John 8, 2 through 3. Come on, computer. Wake up. Let's do it this way. John 8, 2, 2, 3. Jesus returned to the Mount of Olives, but early the next morning he was back again at the temple. And a crowd soon gathered, and he sat down and he taught them. And as he was speaking, the teachers of religious law and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in the act of adultery. They put her in front of the crowd. Hey, Lacey. It's early morning. Jesus is teaching. Ain't nothing on my way today. Oh, my goodness. It's early morning. Jesus is teaching. And the Jewish leaders, they bring this woman to him. and she's been found guilty of adultery. Now, is Jesus going to condemn this woman? Is he going to let her go? So we see Jesus' response in John 8, 4 through 11. Teacher, they say to Jesus, this woman was caught in the act of adultery, and the law of Moses says it to stone her. What do you say? Well, they're trying to trap him into saying something that they could use against him, but Jesus stooped down and wrote in the dust with his finger. And they kept demanding an answer. So he stood up and he said, all right, but let the one who's never sinned throw the first stone. Then he stooped down again and wrote in the dust. When the accusers heard this, they slipped away one by one, beginning with the oldest, until only Jesus was left in the middle of the crowd with the woman. And then Jesus stood up and said to the woman, where are your accusers? Didn't even one of them condemn you? She says, no, Lord. And he says, neither do I. Go and sin no more. So the temple leaders, the scribes and the Pharisees, they challenge him to find a solution to the problem. What's to be done with this woman that's been found guilty of adultery, a capital crime? And Jesus doesn't question her guilt, nor does he condone it. But he just refuses to speak about it. Instead, he just writes in the sand. So when he straightens up, of course, he looks at the crowds. Let the person who's without sin cast the first stone, and they all melt away. It's not long. He's in Jerusalem, and it's not long before his death. And he's probably spending his days in Jerusalem, and he's nice at the house of Bethany, and traversing the valley and the hill road between these two places every day. He knows that he's in danger. He knows he's surrounded by enemies. But instead of doing what I would do, or what any of us would have done, and go back to the safety of Galilee, he faces the danger head on in the temple. His presence is a statement that he'll not back down from who he is or what he believes. So, in the early morning, and the place is just beginning to stir up, and there's not many people around, not the crowds that'll gather later in the day, and in this kind of muted atmosphere, in the great courtyard of the temple, Jesus is approached by a group of people. The scribes and Pharisees, the educated people of their day, cautious, law-abiding, economically prosperous. Most of them are lawyers and civil servants of one sort or another, and they know their worth. These people have worked hard to get where they are, and they take their responsibilities very seriously. And one of these responsibilities is maintaining calm in a society that's prone to mayhem. Now, it's not easy to do. There's been frequent rebellions against the Romans who, if there's any trouble, they kind of kill first and ask questions later. So the scribes and the Pharisees are in fact trying to maintain the status quo, so to speak. That's their job. And they see Jesus as a threat to stability. Okay? He constantly challenges the traditional authorities, and he appears to have a gang of followers that go with him everywhere that he goes. He disregards the normal Jewish rituals about laws and eating and sitting down with meals with known lawbreakers, and he does all the stuff that you're not supposed to do, and Passover is approaching, and the crowds are flocking to Jerusalem, and gosh, this guy's got to be kept in check. He's just too out of the box for the scribes and Pharisees. Any hint of rebellion at this time will bring down the wrath of the Romans, and a lot of innocent heads are going to roll. So, one way of containing him and keeping him under control would be to discredit him as a teacher. Okay? If he's given one of these dilemmas that he can't solve and he fails to find this solution, his reputation will be undermined. And, people will be less likely to kind of follow him around because they, hey, he's not who we thought he was. So they hit on a problem that they themselves have been wrestling with. What to do when the law of Moses and the law of the Romans kind of challenge each other. Such a situation arises when the law of Moses is the death penalty for a particular offense like adultery, and the Romans have authorized their appointee, the governor, to impose a death sentence, and no other person can do so. So the scribes wonder, what's the right thing to do in this situation? Follow the law of Moses, which as Jews are required to do, and risk the consequences, or just do what the Romans command? So some kind of probably in a conversation, what do we do about this? What do we do about that? Someone hits you on the idea of posing this idea to Jesus. Let's pose this question to Jesus. They've been arguing about what to do. Let's hear what he's got to say. Can't do any harm to try. And there's also the possibility that he'll slip up when he responds. It's a win-win. Think about that. They can organize some sort of accusation, remove him from the public sphere, and at least until Passover is over. This is a very important holiday. They don't want this messed up. So I'm not sure if they bring this woman from a prison cell, is my thinking, or directly from the bedroom. I don't know. I'd like to think from a prison cell, though. Okay? To the temple where Jesus is teaching. My opinion, in the outer courtyards of the temple. The court of the Gentiles, or the court of women, is where she was. That's the only areas that she could be in, because women could not go any deeper into the holy area. Understand? So, I've heard various things about they take her in front of Jesus, but not the man. Where was the man? Well, by the law in that day, both parties to the adultery were charged and punished. There was probably no leniency shown to the man either. In fact, rabbinic law said that he was more responsible for what happened than she was. Okay? So, I'm thinking that maybe he had already been dealt with. That's why he's never mentioned. I don't know. I don't know. We'll know those answers when we get to heaven. So as for her, it's generally assumed that she was young and married. Nothing's known about her appearance. Nothing's known about her financial status. Nothing's known about her family background. The only thing that I can assume is this. She was terrified, no doubt disheveled, hopeless. She had disgraced herself and her family, and now she faced a horrific death sentence. See, stoning is particularly brutal, okay? It in the context of the time, though, it was logical, okay? The first 2 stones had to be thrown by the witnesses to the adultery. The first 2 stones had to be thrown by the witnesses of the adultery. And then after that, each member of the community in which the 2 adulterers lived had to come forward and throw a stone. So the thinking behind this was, since everybody threw a stone, no one person can be held responsible for the death of the pair. I know. It's morbid, but that's the way it worked. So the scribes and Pharisees approach Jesus and they present this little dilemma. The woman is undoubtedly guilty, and according to the law of Moses, she should be punished by death. The Problem is that this can't be done since the Roman overlords have stripped Jewish leaders of the powers to execute criminals. So what's to be done? Well, Jesus is a smart fellow. He knows that it's a setup. He knows that if he pronounces the sentence of death on the woman, that he's flouting the Roman law. And if he lets her off, he's flouting the law of Moses. So what's a boy to do? What is a boy to do? So instead of answering, Jesus does something unexpected, which is always a good thing to do. Do what's unexpected. That's what I do, something that's unexpected. And he bends down and he writes in the dust. So what does he write? Oh, nobody knows. That's another thing that we're going to have to ask when we get to heaven. But there's been a lot of theories and clever suggestions, and I have a few clever suggestions myself, but no real answers. One thing that I've read or heard that he wrote mercy in the sand, and I think that's all sweet, and it could be true. What if in the sand, my opinion, is he wrote a woman's name that every man in that courtyard knew, and I'll get to that in just a minute. Did he bend down to write just to stall for time or to kind of let himself think a little more clearly? Maybe he was mad. I think maybe he got angry sometimes and he just had to just stop and get possession of his thoughts. I doodle when I'm upset or when I'm in deep thought. If I'm in a meeting, I'm doodling because I'm thinking. So he may have been trying to avoid confrontation or pretending to ignore it. Who knows? But these guys weren't put off. They kept demanding an answer. And Jesus stands up and he faces them. And he says directly, and this has shaped so much of Christian thinking, but he says the words, let anyone among you who is without sin to be the first to throw a stone. And he bends down again and he starts writing his finger in the sand again. Now, the authority of his words and presence, it affects them. They're silenced at last. And one by one, they melt away to the gathering crowd. Now, eventually, Jesus is left alone with this woman standing in front of him. And he straightens up and he speaks to her. Where are your accusers? Has no one seen fit to condemn you? And she simply answers, no one, sir. And I'm sure she had her head down. And I don't condemn you either. Go on your way, but don't sin no more. Now, he doesn't condone what she's done. He doesn't dismiss her sin as unimportant or understandable. He knows, and she knows, what she done was wrong. But he condemns the sin, not the sinner. And he commands her not to sin anymore. The woman is called to change. Called to change. And that message is directed at each and every one of us today. No matter how long you've been a Christian. A call to change. So, we all know that as Christians, pointing the finger has always been a way of shifting blame. We're quick to point to a tyrant in a foreign country or a rich man's greed. And thank God that we're not like that. When we ignore the tyranny in our own workplace or family, or we ignore our own runaway materialism. The story doesn't condone the sinner. It doesn't condemn the sinner, but calls the sinner to change. be saved. Now I want to throw something else at you. Okay? I found an extract from the Apologetic. And it's by Francis Spufford, Spufford. And I want to read this to you. Because it really drove the nail home for me. And it's an excerpt from the book, and it says, he arrives in town just as a public execution is about to take place. The criminal is a woman taken in adultery, which could mean, now I want you to grab hold of this, taken in adultery at that time, which could mean she was caught having literal sex with someone other than her husband, but it could also mean that she smiles at a soldier when she serves wine to him, or that she's been seen chatting at the well with the boy who isn't her brother or her cousin. Or that she works in a brothel in town and is ashamed and it possesses and has been servicing 5 burgers a night for a decade. One way or another, she has concentrated herself on the town's fear and alarm about desire. Let me say that one more time. She has concentrated herself in the town's fear and alarm about desire, and the good people have gathered to punish her for what's going on in their heads. They've already had their hands on the rocks, as the law stipulates, neither too small or too big, which will crack her bones and smash out the flesh of disturbance of her desirability. But Yeshua intervenes, which is not necessarily a very sensible thing to do when virtue is breathing fast and looking forward for this kind of threat. He asks what she's done, and they tell him. Oh, he says, well then, one of you who's never wanted anything bad had better throw the first stone. One of you who's never wanted anything bad had better throw the first stone. And he raises his eyebrows and he waits. And something in the gaze of his ordinary eyes makes the good people shuffle where they stand. And there's a pause. And perhaps it helps that his friends have walked in town with him, equally dusty from the road, and among the ragtag of his followers, male and female, are hanging back to see what he does. There's some quite large and burly men. But anyway, there's a hollow clock, clock of stones dropping to the ground, and the executioners slink away, and in a moment, only the executee is left there with Yeshua and his friends, and she's weeping, and he helps her to stand up. Did you grab that from this book, where it says it could also mean that she smiles at soldiers when she serves wine to them? Or that she's been seen chatting at the well with a boy who's neither her brother or her cousin? Or she could work at the brothel. Either way, she has concentrated herself on the town's fear and alarm about desire. Sometimes things are as they seem. Maybe she was having an affair. Maybe she would work in a brothel. Maybe it was just a mess from the get-go. Or maybe she was indeed innocent. I smile at people. I talk to everybody. So, those without sin to cast the first stone. Jesus didn't condemn her. I don't think we should either.